Hello everyone, welcome to today's session where we are going to resume our discussion over the topic History of English Novel. As we have already discussed about the antecedents or forerunners of this literary genre novel, now in this session we are going to talk about definition and origin of novel and rise of novel in the 18th century along with its factors that influenced the rise of the novel. So let's begin with the definition. And if I read the definition given by this dictionary titled as the Shorter Oxford Dictionary, it states that novel is a fictitious prose narrative of considerable length in which characters and actions representative of real life are portrayed in a plot of more or less complexity. One more definition we will take, then we'll discuss about it. According to one more definition, which states that novel is a piece of prose fiction of a reasonable length. Now in both of these definitions, if you have noticed, then in both there is one term which is highlighted, that is prose. That novel is a prose form. Novel is majorly novel is written in prose form. Prose, as you know, that it is a common or ordinary spoken form of language without the presence of any poetical rhythmic structure. But for your knowledge, I should tell you that there are certain novels which are also written in verse, like Vikram Seth's The Golden Gate and Alexander Pushkin's Eugene Onegin. So there are some creations in verse as well in this literary genre novel, but majorly or prominently we can say that it is a prose narrative. And along with this, one more thing is noticeable, that is that in both the definitions are stressing upon one fact, that is length. That the first definition is saying that it should have considerable length, and the second definition is also saying that it has reasonable length. That it means in terms of length, novel is a little longer than a short story, because this aspect of novel helps us in distinguishing this genre from the genre of short story. Short story is shorter in length and it has a certain considerable or reasonable length. Now there are some novels which are similar to short story in length. Then what will we call them? We can call them novella. There is a term for such novels which has a certain length which is almost similar to short story. Then in that case there is a term novella. We can call such type of creations with the term novella. So this is something about definition of this literary genre or style of writing novel. And if we talk about origin, we'll not take it so long. In short, if we talk about its origin, then for novel, or we can say this term novel is considered to have been taken from Latin word novellus, Italian word novella, which also means a little new thing, little. Now this little one we'll discuss shortly, that earlier it was in shorter or little sense, but now it is not a little. Novel is not a little in terms of length. And then in French word there is the word novel. And so this is what about origin. And one more episodic, I can say, historical aspect of this term novel is this, that Boccaccio, as we have also talked about him in our previous session, the Italian author, actually he was the one who first popularized this term novel by his by terming his 10 short stories which he called Decameron. He called them novella storia, which means a short tale in prose. So it was Boccaccio who popularized this term novel by calling his 10 short stories which were titled Decameron in 14th century. Now what we can figure out from this fact? We can figure out that until the 17th century, the term novel was majorly or prominently meant for the kind of stories which were written by Boccaccio. The collection of short stories which were written by Boccaccio, the word novel was used in that sense, in that regard, until the 17th century. But it was in in the 18th century, with the rise of this term novel in its proper form, by the experiments of some 18th century pioneers of novel writing, I can say, there were adequate predecessors as well, and along with them, when in 18th century some novelists who experimented, who availed the opportunity of this stage which was set by the predecessors, then on, from the 18th century, there was a shift in understanding of novel. What was that shift? That shift was that from the until the 17th century, and after, it was understood in terms of Boccaccio's collection of short story, what is novel, prominently. But after that, there was a shift with the experiments of some popular novelists, or who were engaged in this development of novel, that the shift was that novel was mainly now understood in terms of that is not a short tale in prose. The shift was from short tale in prose to prose narrative of considerable length. So that was the shift which occurred after some experiments after the 17th century. So this was something about definition and origin of this term novel. Now we are going to discuss about the factors which influenced the rise of this term novel. So to give you an overview, if I say that there were certain components, or some incidents which happened due to that novel happened in the beginning of 18th century in its proper terms. They were increasing literacy rate, industrial revolution, rise in the middle class, and mobile libraries. So these were the prominent factor. And one more thing to be noticed, that in this time period only, there we can see a departure from romances, from traditional medieval stories about knights or of knights. There was a departure from these romances to the stories which were prominently revolving around or focused upon the pragmatism and morality of middle class people, because it was the time, it was also the time of the rise in the middle class. That is why there was a departure from romances to the stories of people who belong to middle class, their morality, their pragmatism, and very similitude of their life. And one more thing, as you know, that Alexander Pope was one of the notable writers of this century or this time period. That is why how can they be spared of his influence. Actually, it was this dictum which impacted, or which had a great influence on the psyche of that time people, that what Alexander Pope said, the dictum was, the proper study of mankind is man. That is why this dictum and such others invoked the interest of the readers and writers as well, to explore the human character. The proper study of mankind is man. That's why it invoked them to study human characters, to explore it, and while exploring and studying, they created some real life characters which came in for, which gave the rise of novel. Because in novel, in the beginning, you will find that the stories are really belong to the middle class people, the people who belong to this strata of society. So let's begin with the one of the major factors, that is industrial revolution. We are going to discuss them now one by one in detail. So the first one is so we were discussing the major factors that influence the rise of the novel in 18th century. One of them was industrial revolution. The growth in industries played an important role in the rise of the novel, because now the machinery came into process, and due to that manual work was very less. The work could be done so faster. That is why the people were having more time for rest and leisure, which they could resort, or they resorted to novel reading. One more sub factor under this revolution was the advent of printing. press, due to which multiple copies could be produced at a cheaper rates. The outcome was that now the people who were who having lower income, and despite that they could afford buying books, which also increased the reading section of society. And along with the novel write-ups, there were variety of writings were in trend, like newspapers and magazines. And what this variety of publication did with the help of printing press, that they developed, or they helped people in developing the habit of reading, which ultimately led them to start reading novels. And there were also some novels which published in magazines and even in newspapers, which further increased the access of novels along with the book form. So these were the factors which popularized very much the novel writing and reading. And in this way we can say that this industrial revolution paved the way to the rise of the middle class people, because the middle class people were those people who raised from the lower strata of society, and they have attained this new status of middle class, who were having now time, and they demanded books to read. So these were the people who were more interested in reading about their everyday experiences rather than reading romances. They are more interested in real life characters, which prompted the writers or authors of that time, like Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, and Henry Fielding, depicting something very much related to these people, so very much which can resonate their desires. So that is why we can see that the novels from this time were around such type of characters which belong to prominently belong to middle class. Next factor which influenced the rise of the novel was decline of romance and drama. As now romances were mostly suitable to elite, aristocratic, and noble families. They were not appealing to the common people much. So that is why they are not now enjoying or cherishing that much readership which they used to have earlier. Now the people were belong to the society which were not aristocratic or noble families in typical terms. So these common people got bored from the stories of romances, and they had no relevance of this sort of stories. And moreover, these stories were centuries old, so they didn't invoke any kind of interest in the readers. And also the stories, the story of the romances, the structure of stories, where they are set, their settings where they took place were so much unrealistic that people found it difficult to relate with. So that is why these all were the reasons that romances were becoming very less popular, and they are just departing from the scene gradually. And what novel had some very interesting characteristics, that as it was written in first person, which immediately gives a personal touch and recent kind of flavor, and that interests the readers. And it also has ordinary characters with which people could easily relate with. So these were some factors that were so appealing about the novel, that the people were naturally attracted towards this new genre of writing. And one more factor we can consider in rising of novel, and rising of novel was promoted by the declining of drama. Actually, in 17th century, during the rule of Cromwell, theatres were banned. Theatres which were so much theatres which were so much popular in Elizabethan times, now they were banned. And in Restoration age, when they they came back, theatres opened, they lost their charm, because now a new kind of writing had taken the entry, or it was on the scene, that was novel. So that is why theatres could not establish its essence as earlier. So this was also the reason of declining, of rising the novel, declining of drama. And one more factor we can add in this section is that novel could reach vast audience in comparison to theater, where only limited audience is possible. So these are some of the factors which added or which helped in helped novel in its rise. So, and the third major factor was, which we have little discussed also, that was rise of the middle class. As it was the time when trade and commerce were growing, and the people who were from lower rung of in the society, or their status was increased, and they are now much wealthy. They are increasing, becoming wealthy, and their status was now enhanced. So this newly attained status, this section who had now only attained newly attained status, which we call middle class, they started behaving like traditional landed gentry, and they demanded books to read in their league, like as they were behaving traditional landed gentry. Moreover, with the improved living standard, now men and women could acquire education, and they were able to read now simply. And one more thing, that women readers were increased, because they were now greater leisure than earlier with the advent of machine and industrial revolution. So they could also read now, and moreover it was also considered that high status women should engage themselves in reading literature. So this was also in vogue. That is why women readers increased. So, and this newly raised, I can say, or newly appeared middle class readership, these readers demanded a very new kind of literature, which could confirm their temper and taste, because they were not having any interest in any medieval traditional story of knight. They were more interested in reading something about their themselves, actually their real life experience, from a character who should be from their class only, with whom they can relate easily. So in this way we can say that they were more interested or in exploring the psyche of the middle class and the writers as well. So that is why these all factors prompted the authors or writers like Defoe, Richardson and Fielding, and that is why their creations appealed readers, because they created something related to middle class. That was Robinson Crusoe, Pamela and Tom Jones. The next and last factor which influenced the rise of the novel was mobile libraries. This was an initiative to increase the reading public, and this also proved very much successful and very much catalytic in terms of rise of the novel, because what they were doing under this initiative, that books were brought to the home of the readers, where they could read it, and later after the finish they can give it back. If the readers join the membership, or if the readers join this or they become the members of mobile libraries. So it also played a very important role, mobile libraries, because books were brought to the readers, and women readers again got benefited because they stayed home. They were staying at home, and then they could exchange the books after reading one. So in this way, mobile libraries also played a very significant role in the rise of the novel. So these all factors, industrial revolution, decline in romance and drama, rise of the middle class, and mobile libraries where people can access literature at their home even. So these all factors played very important role in the rise of the drama. And in the next session, now we will discuss that how pioneers of the novel writing like Daniel Defoe, Samuel Richardson, Henry Fielding and Laura Stern, they were the pioneers Along with them, we will also discuss some major or some important novelists who also played their important role in taking this literary genre novel to the highest point of glory. So that's all for today. Thank you for now.